The summer after their 7th grade, my brother and his 2 friends set the mountain by our beach house on fire. It was a hot, dry summer day in the coastal town in Turkey where my family has spent every summer since the birth of my brother. The 3 boys, freshly in the throes of puberty, hiked up the hour-long trek to the top of a small mountain as they normally do. But this time, they brought a magnifying glass. They were using the magnifying glass to put some holes in some dry leaves, fueled by that curious, albeit short-sighted scientific mind that children tend to have. Sure enough, their experiment ended quickly when one of the leaves caught fire and a spark landed on the next leaf and then the next leaf until a whole patch of land was on fire. The boys, terror in their eyes, rushed down the mountain and watched incredulously as helicopters had to be brought in from a nearby town to drop buckets of water from the sea on the mountain. And miraculously, within 4 hours, the whole fire was extinguished. Nobody was hurt, but a lot of trees died, and the smell of smoke lingered in the air for the next 2 days. My brother was grounded for the rest of the summer, although I don't think any punishment could have been as effective as the terror he must have felt watching the fire grow in front of his eyes. What my brother and his friends did was short-sighted, reckless, stupid. And while I think most of us have never set a mountain on fire, I think we can think back to a similar, if less destructive, mistake from our adolescence. It's probably hard to relate to that immature kid. We probably think, how could I have been so reckless? And we cringe at how much it mattered to us to look cool and how much it drove us to make stupid decisions. And while for a lot of us, those stupid decisions did not have any long-lasting consequences, maybe aside from the cringeworthy memories, sometimes one stupid decision can be enough to derail a lifetime. Take the criminal case of the 5 Michigan teenagers. These boys, ages ranging from 15 to 17, were throwing rocks down an overpass one day after school in the dark. It was a stupid, reckless decision, not too different from the decision to bring up a magnifying glass on a hot, dry summer day to a mountain. However, the boys were not as lucky as my brother and his friends. One of the rocks ended up crashing through the windshield of a van that was passing below, and the man in the passenger seat, a 32-year-old father of 4, died on the way to the hospital. The boys are now being charged with second-degree murder, and they're likely going to face a substantial sentence. Given the devastating human cost of their actions, most agree that some kind of punishment is necessary. But the question is, should they be treated as severely as an adult would be? Neuroscientists have suggested, and the Supreme Court has agreed, that they should not. Over the past few decades, neuroscience has revealed the biological basis of a fundamental difference between adolescents and adults that we intuitively recognize. On average, the human brain continues to grow until the age of 25. Specifically, the regions of the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala are 2 of the regions to develop the last. The prefrontal cortex is in charge of executive functioning, like rational decision-making and impulse control, while the amygdala is crucial for emotion regulation. With these 2 regions underformed, teenagers are a lot more likely to engage in reckless behavior and exhibit poor self-control and be swayed intensely by peer pressure. Given the growing and consistent scientific evidence, the Supreme Court has deemed it unconstitutional to treat adolescents as severely as adults. They have agreed specifically that it would be cruel and unusual punishment to give capital punishment or a life sentence without the possibility of parole to a juvenile. The logic behind this is simple. Because the capacities necessary for culpability are underdeveloped in adolescents, they should not be treated as harshly as an adult would be for the same crimes. However, the 5 kids in the Michigan case are being tried as adults. This means that they're not going to be afforded the same constitutional protections the Supreme Court has offered to juveniles, which means that they could conceivably receive a life sentence or even a capital punishment. Their lawyers are likely going to bring up the developing brain defense and claim that their clients just should not be treated as adults because their brains aren't fully developed. But given the 30% success rate of this defense, the boys aren't facing promising odds. Judges and juries are simply not going to change their minds based solely on the neuroscience in a lot of the cases. So, despite the science, the law can't offer many protections to juveniles who are being treated as adults. And a similar predicament exists for those legal adults who still have immature brains, because as I've said, the brain continues to grow well into the mid-20s. So for an adult who is legally past the age of 18, he is past that strict binary in the eyes of the law. But for the brain, no such binary exists. The prefrontal cortex is not going to look any different after someone's 18th birthday than it did the day before. So the person is going to be a legal adult, and raising the developing brain defense is going to be a lot less successful, even though he's going to be just as restricted as a juvenile. I believe that as we learn more about the brain's development and plasticity, it's going to be very difficult to ignore the realization that a lot of our fundamental legal concepts are deeply flawed. And while science cannot answer questions of justice, it can definitely inform them. And in this context, the neuroscience shows us to be just to adolescents who are making stupid decisions due in part because their brains are not fully developed, we're going to have to fundamentally reshape a lot of our legal definitions around guilt and adulthood. Thank you.